All right, chapter 31. All right, chapter 30 was pretty intense with Officer Mueller kind of going on their side a little bit. So let's see what chapter 31 has. Fritz and I went straight home afterward. Mueller's visit had left both of us with legs of jelly, and nothing he had promised was very comforting. As far as I was concerned, wherever we went now, his gun was still pointed our way. Another dreaded reality to add to my growing list of worries. As we walked home, Fritz pointed out the good news that Mueller would probably come with us for the escape. Otherwise, he could have just shot us there and earned himself a fine promotion for discovering that tunnel. I suppose that was how Fritz's and my thinking had evolved. The fact that he hadn't been shot and left to die was the morbid way in which we cheered ourselves up. We passed by a bakery offering old bread for a single Ostmark. Fritz said we could spare that much and bought some for each of us, which we munched on as we walked. It was dry and wouldn't go very far in helping our hunger, but it was much better than nothing. Frau Eberhardt was in front of our apartments as we approached, so Fritz and I crossed the street and pretended to look in the storefronts there until she went inside. We'd go to any extreme to avoid her in the future. It was a long night afterward for me. As tired as I felt, too much had happened that day. With Anna and what was usually the final cut in our friendship. The broken shovel, and then Officer Mueller. If we had been found by anyone else, Fritz and I might be dead right now. Maybe that was still our fate. If Mueller would figure out what we were doing, others could too. It was only a matter of time. By morning, though, I felt a little better. We shared the last of what little food was in the apartment and then reminded each other that a new shovel was more important than a full belly. After buying the shovel, we made our way to the welcome building. It looked just as it had the night before, but different to me somehow because now our secret wasn't ours alone, and any safety I'd felt in working on this quiet, unused road was gone. Fritz rubbed my head. Today will be better, Gerda. I'm sure of it. I frowned back at him. There's a pit in my stomach. Well, there's nothing in mine, so consider yourself lucky. I didn't like his joke. Not at all. I'm serious, Fritz. Something bad is going to happen. It's only leftover worries from yesterday. Fritz stared at me a moment too long, as if trying to convince himself of his own words. All right, now let's get to work. Things went fine for a few hours. I was in the garden clearing more weeds and had already emptied out a lot of dirt from the basement. But when I saw Fritz at the basement window hissing at me to come inside and to hurry, his eyes were so wide I could see the whites from here, the reason for the pit in my gut. I dropped the spade and hurried for the building, careful not to make it look like anything was unusual, if anyone was watching. But when I ducked inside, Fritz had already returned to the shelter, and I breathlessly raced to follow. What's the matter? I called while descending the ladder. My answer came as soon as I entered the tunnel. Water trickled beneath my feet and sank into the soil, creating a dense mud. The farther I walked, the more water there was. At the back of the tunnel, Fritz had exposed a pipe that was now spurting out pressurized water like a fireman's hose. The hole in it wasn't large, but it was enough to cause significant damage and was getting worse. The streams of water tore dirt from the walls and sent it in chunks to the ground. Our tunnel was flooding, and if we didn't find a way to stop the water, it would collapse entirely. How did this happen? I cried. I nicked it with a shovel. Didn't even know it was there until water shot out at me. What do we do? Fritz wrapped his hands around the pipe, which helped, but water leaked down his arms, and we knew it would burst again as soon as he let go. Maybe even break open and flood the entire tunnel before we could escape. I have an idea, he said, but it'll take some time to get what we need. You have to stay here and hold this pipe. How long? I can't. However long it takes. Come on, Gerda, you can do this. So I stood on tiptoes, then reached up and replaced my hands with his. The water pushed at me with the force I didn't expect, and it took effort to keep my grip on the pipe. Hurry, I just told him. Just hurry. He ran from the tunnel and left me in absolute darkness. The flashlight was somewhere at my feet, but already buried in mud, and I couldn't let go to search for it. The water dripping down my hands was cold, and the wetter I became, the more I shivered. Fritz said it would take him some time. How long did that mean? An hour? 2 hours? Until the evening? I couldn't hold on until evening. With water still dripping from the pipe, I wasn't even sure the tunnel would be here that long. If it collapsed, it would take me with it. In the darkness, a chunk of dirt or maybe rock fell somewhere behind me. I instinctively ducked, protecting myself from whatever might fall next. It terrified me to wonder how much had just fallen, and if more was about to come down. The only thing I knew for sure was that the mud at my feet was getting deeper. Occasionally, when my hold slipped, water would spurt at harsh angles, inevitably bringing down more chunks of dirt. At one point, it loosened a rock overhead. I heard something start to fall and backed away from the sound, but when it came down, it grazed my arm. From the sting, I was sure it gave me a deep cut, though I couldn't remove my hands from the pipe to check it. It wasn't much longer before I was entirely soaked through. My wet clothes clung to my body, my feet were sinking in mud, and my hair was in my face and over my eyes. But I suppose it didn't matter because there was nothing I could see in here anyway. I was shivering, and my fingers and toes were already numb, but I knew if I let go of the pipe, everything we had worked so hard for was finished. So I held on, doing whatever I could to distract myself. I solved long division problems, recited poems, and prayed for a stronger willpower, though it would be the last trait my mother would want me to strengthen. When those didn't work, I sang songs in my head. Ironically, the only ones I could think of were the patriotic songs of the pioneers. But their rousing tunes didn't help for long. Time was crawling by, and I'd lost any sense of how long Fritz had been gone. Was it an hour? Was it more? He would come back, I was sure of that, unless he had been arrested for some reason. Maybe Frau Eberhard had caused us trouble again. She was obviously capable of it. Or what if the tunnel was already collapsing from the outside? Maybe that's why it was so dark in here, and why he hadn't come back. Maybe he couldn't. That terrified me, and I tried to shake the worst thoughts from my mind. All I knew was that Fritz had said to hold on, so I held to the pipe and to my senses and to my courage, bundling them together and knotting them within my heart. I closed my eyes and repeated his last words to me. Come on, Gerda. You can do this. Fritz did return eventually. I wasn't sure it was him at first, not until I heard his voice calling for me. Where's the flashlight? He asked. Somewhere below me it fell. Fritz dug for that first, and when the light finally returned to the tunnel, I began breathing easier. He was fine, and I would be after a while, but for now, I was exhausted and freezing, and my numb hands ached from the pressure and the cold. I'd held them up for so long I doubted any blood was left in them. What happened to your arm? He asked. With the light on it, I saw the cut was much worse than I expected. It ran in a long, jagged line that would probably leave a scar and stung like it had been attacked by wasps, but at least it wasn't bleeding anymore. I shrugged it off and asked, what do you have for the pipe? Not much, but it'll have to do. Fritz held up a clamp and an empty bicycle tube. Papa once fixed a pipe in our apartment this way. It's not permanent, but it will work for now. Where'd you get those? The clamp came from Herr Kraus. He had a few people at his place for some sort of meeting, so he told me to go in his back room and take what I needed from his gadget collection. Didn't ask any other questions. The bicycle tube came from Claudia. She has extras in the shop where she works, and I hoped she wouldn't ask questions either. Claudia? Your girlfriend? Ex girlfriend. Remember? Now move your hand. It's going to spurt water, but I've got to wrap this tube around the leak. I obeyed and caught a powerful spray of water to my face before Fritz got the tube over it. But he pulled it tight and then began wrapping it around the pipe. With every layer, the water sealed up tighter. Hand me the clamp, he said. It's in my back pocket. I grabbed the clamp, and while he worked to get it pinched around the pipe, I said, what do you mean you hoped Claudia wouldn't ask questions? Did she? He paused for only a moment and then said, I went into her shop, filthy and wet, and you and I are both thinner than we ought to be right now. Yeah, she had questions. What did you tell her? Only about the garden. I said I fell into the pond and that we needed the bicycle tube to prop up some plants. And did she believe you? Fritz finished sealing the clamp and then patted at the pipe. When he was convinced the leak was fixed, he glanced down at me and said, Probably not, but she used to like me. I hope it'll be okay. That wasn't good enough, not after all our other close calls, but as things became more dangerous, simply hoping for anything good was probably the best we could do.